It's been 2 years since Windows 11 first came onto the scene, and when it first came out, there were a lot of people warning video editors not to switch. In fact, there were actually reports of Davinci Resolve running slower on Windows 11 than they did on Windows 10. So here's the question. Now that it's been a couple years, and with the end of support date for Windows 10 being only a couple years away, has anything changed? Is Windows 11 finally stable enough for Davinci Resolve? Let's talk about it. To answer the questions I had about Windows 11, I did two things. I probably did them in the wrong order, but whatever. First, I finally upgraded my Puget Systems PC to Windows 11 because I wanted to give you my personal experience using Windows 11 with Davinci Resolve. I also sat down with Matt Bach from Puget Systems to find out what their experience has been and what they recommend doing. I even got some hardware suggestions from him in case you're looking to buy a new PC. Make sure you stick around for that. In the meantime, let's jump into it, starting with the big giant elephant in the room. We have a little less than 2 years to go before Windows 10 is no longer supported by Windows. That means no more updates, no more security patches. You can still use Windows 10 after that, but you'll be leaving yourself open to any new security threats that aren't already covered. So now that we're all but being forced to move away from Windows 10, I wanted to know if the crazy bugs and slower performance that people were experiencing have been fixed. Here's what Matt had to say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we did testing originally, just like what you said, and it was definitely slower. There's some weird issues. That's actually pretty standard for new major OSs. So it's not just a Windows 11 thing. We had exactly the same thing with Windows 10 when it launched. Same thing with, Windows XP and Windows 2000, way back in the day. So nothing really abnormal there. That's actually one of the reasons why, like on our systems, we didn't start selling Windows 11 for, I think it was like 2 or 3 months after launch. These days, I think pretty much all of that has gotten solved. I'm not aware of any major performance issues. There are still some times where like one thing will be a little bit faster in Windows 11, but then this other thing is a little bit faster in Windows 10. So it's all pretty much a wash these days now.
And for the most part, that's been my experience as well, other than some pretty interesting UI differences. We'll get to that later. I haven't really noticed any performance differences working with Davinci Resolve in Windows 11. Everything on the video side has been as solid as it was before I upgraded. That being said, when I first did my upgrade, I was running into a pretty nasty audio issue. All of my audio, not just in Davinci Resolve, would suddenly get super choppy, and the only way to fix it was to reboot the computer. It turns out Matt had an answer for that, as well as an answer for most reported bugs on Windows 11.
What I can say is, prior to this call, I talked to our support department and I asked them, like, hey, what's kind of the state of Windows 11? What are you guys hearing? Are there any trends still? And overwhelmingly, the biggest thing I got from them is that most of their support calls aren't actually about Windows 11 itself, but how should they upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11? What do they need to do? Because it's added like TPM requirements. It's added, all this other stuff. As far as like actual issues go, almost every single one of them has come down to it was an upgrade rather than a fresh install. So I don't know if that's exactly, there's always like weird oddball issues that'll come up with anything. That's just computers. But by and large, that was their like single go-to thing to get across is like, man, if you can do a fresh install instead of an upgrade, do that. That will fix most of the problems that people seem to be having with Windows 11.
Honestly, I should have known better. I was being impatient. I didn't want my PC out of commission for an entire day. And honestly, I'm not sure I trust myself to do a fresh install of any operating system. It's not exactly a quick process.
Yeah. And it's a pain because then you got to make sure you've backed up all of your data that's on your primary OS drive. If you have like license keys for different things, you need to make sure you have those available. Either like find your original order, or there are utilities out there. What's it? Magic Jelly Bean is actually one I use, a really weird name, but it can actually pull out like your Microsoft Office keys, even your Windows key, because if you're Windows 10, you should be able to just use the Windows 10 key for Windows 11 and just use that when you're doing the fresh install. So like there's utilities like that can pull out the keys But especially if you have like plugins and stuff, often those you need to make sure you have a key if it's not just a normal email login. So that's the biggest hassle. And honestly, I'll admit, my system right now, I'm on Windows 10 still, and it's mostly because of that. I have not been able to find the entire full day where I can spend backing up all of my files, making sure everything's fine, and then going through that fresh install and reinstalling Premiere and Resolve and Photoshop and everything else. So it is a big hassle, but I view that very much as spend a little bit more time now, because as soon as you're done, hopefully you'll just be done rather than having to deal with lingering issues by doing an upgrade.
I'll have Magic Jelly Bean linked below if you want to check it out. And I will say this, shortly after upgrading, a new update came out that seems to have fixed my audio issues, so that's good. Okay, so other than doing a fresh install being a total pain, are there any reasons why you shouldn't switch to Windows 11? I mean, the bugs are basically gone, Davinci Resolve is running smoothly, but there are still some people holding out, and I wanted to know why.
It's a smattering of issues. I think every single one is slightly unique. It is some where people like, hey, I already know Windows 10. I don't want to deal with the changes of Windows 11, which really isn't that much. There's not that much changes in Windows 11 as far as like the UI goes. Like there are some, but not too much. I think the biggest single factor is some people either have old software or old plugins that doesn't have Windows 11 support still. There's fewer and fewer of those as we go on, but there's also plenty of applications and software that people use that stopped being developed 5 years ago. So it's like, well, that's not getting any update to Windows 11, so they're stuck with Windows 10. That's not as common in the video world as it is in like engineering especially. Like, man, some of those applications were written in the 90s, and like it's amazing that it even works on Windows 10. It's so like they just don't want to chance it.
This brings up another thing that, one, you should definitely do before making the switch, and two, something that my impatient ass failed to do. Make sure that all the plugins and software you're going to be using with Windows 11 actually has support for Windows 11. By the way, if you do have something that doesn't have Windows 11 support, you might want to start looking for a replacement. With the end of support date for Windows 10 approaching, most manufacturers are going to stop selling Windows 10 systems if they haven't already. So before we move on to what you can expect after making the switch, let's put the final nail in the coffin. Is Windows 10 safe for Davinci Resolve users, and is it recommended? Here's what Matt had to say.
I would say it's definitely safe. I don't know if I would call it an upgrade. I'd do a reinstall, which I mean, it's upgrading, but just to separate from the you click one button and Windows does it for you versus doing it manually, that is the way I would go. But once you get everything installed and everything, yeah, I think it's very much safe. As for recommended, I think you've got time. If you're running on Windows 10 now and everything's working great, it's doing everything you want, don't worry about it. Like unless there's something you actually need in Windows 11, I would have it on your to-do list to do within the next year and a half. But I wouldn't, it's not one of those things where like, hey, yeah, you have to do it now because it'll be more stable and it'll be faster. It's more just, no, just do it before end of support for Windows 10.
And I tend to agree with Matt. Yes, it's fine if you want to move to Windows 11. Everything should work properly as long as your software supports it and you do a fresh install. Davinci Resolve works great in Windows 11, but you do have some time. We're not in emergency mode yet. Cool? Let's move on. Now, I know that the focus of this video is Windows 11 and Davinci Resolve, but honestly, the reasons why I wanted to make the switch to Windows 11 had nothing to do with Davinci Resolve. It was all for some cool new features that I wanted to take advantage of. I'll get to those in a minute. First, let's talk about the general differences between Windows 10 and Windows 11, because honestly, I hadn't really noticed much other than the UI. That being said, I'm not a computer genius by any means, but Matt is, or at least he's a lot closer to it than I am, and he seemed to confirm my experience.
There's going to be a few little oddball things, when you moved over to Windows 11 that's like, oh, that's weird, I don't like that. File Explorer is probably the biggest one that for me to get used to, where it opens things in new tabs now, and like Notepad can do that too. But it's great once you get used to it. So I think most of it's just small stuff like that. Like they've improved like the Windows snapping, where you can snap windows around. I think that's great, but you just got to get a little bit used to it. the things being in the middle at the bottom, and like your start button is at the middle instead of on the side. Well, one, you can change that, but also two, like, it's all stuff that, just little UI tweaks that you'll get used to pretty quickly. So I think by and large, it's not really a big deal of a move. It's not like if anyone was using Windows 8 when they tried to move to the like full screen start menu thing that everyone hated. There's not things like that nearly as much with Windows 11.
By the way, that whole File Explorer tab thing is awesome. It makes it a lot easier to move footage from my SSD to my hard drive and between folders. It really helps to streamline file management. There are some other new features that can help you out as a video editor as well. For instance, if you use a Windows PC but Apple everything else like I do, you can now use your Phone Link app with the iPhone, and with Intel Unison, you essentially have AirDrop between your mobile devices and your PC. And now you can create multiple desktops in Windows to help you stay organized. I haven't taken advantage of this yet, but in the next couple weeks, my plan is to have a desktop for general use, one for video post-production, one for audio post-production, and one for music production. So Windows 11 is stable, Davinci Resolve works well, and there are some cool new features that can make video editing a bit easier once you get used to the UI, which in my personal opinion is a lot better. And so it seems like making the switch to Windows 11 is in fact safe for Davinci Resolve users. And the data seems to back that up. I asked Matt if we had finally crossed the threshold where more people are buying Windows 11 PCs from Puget instead of Windows 10 PCs, and here's what he said.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Davinci Resolve, I mean, I can always look up exact stats if you really want those, and I can send them. You can pop it in at the bottom if you want, but we're probably somewhere around 85 to 90% on Windows 11 now for systems specifically for Davinci Resolve. Those last holdouts, you're always going to get a little bit of holdouts, and I'm not even sure entirely how much longer we'll even be offering Windows 10 as an option, because right now, it's not even we're selling Windows 10. What we're doing is we're selling Windows 11 and then downgrading it to Windows 10. Because as of January 2023, so 10 months ago, you can't buy Windows 10 anymore. You can't buy a new license. It has to be Windows 11, and then you do a downgrade.
Okay, so far we've talked about moving to Windows 11 on your current PC, which is what I did. But what if you're on a machine that isn't eligible for Windows 11? Well, in a couple years, you're going to have a choice to make. You can either keep running with your current PC and risk any new security threats that pop up, or software not working anymore because their latest update made it incompatible with Windows 10, or you can get a new PC. And if you're a video editor using Davinci Resolve on Windows, I would always recommend getting a custom build. And if you're a video editor using Davinci Resolve on Windows in North America, I would always recommend getting that custom build from Puget Systems. They're not sponsoring this video, but I will never miss a chance to shout them out. They're amazing. Anyway, if you're looking for a new PC so you can make the switch to Windows 11, I wanted to save you from the endless unhelpful articles and videos you come across when you Google best PC for video editing 2023. So in a second, I'm going to give you Puget Systems hardware recommendations for Davinci Resolve users on Windows 11. But first, if this video was helpful to you, if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments, and on your way down there, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Oh, and don't forget to go out and make stuff. Thanks for watching, and here are those hardware recommendations I promised you.
GPU and CPU? Well, GPU is probably a little bit more straightforward, actually. So that's almost always going to be an NVIDIA GPU. AMD's done a lot of improvement recently, but NVIDIA is still a little bit ahead on things, especially if you want to use some of the new AI stuff, some of the neural filters and all that. Man, NVIDIA is quite far ahead. So definitely going to be NVIDIA. Exactly which model is going to depend on how many like open effects you use, how much noise reduction you do. I think our most common one is just a 4080, an RTX 4080. Some of our customers do go up to 4090. Some of them are still doing dual. Once you get beyond that, you get into very specialty stuff. But NVIDIA, probably 4080 is kind of mid-level. On the CPU side, it really comes down to what kind of footage you're working with. Intel Core is one way that we go. That's either for the people who have not unlimited budget, basically. They're on a little bit tighter of a budget. or a fixed budget, I should say. The Intel Core 14th Gen just launched. They're not that much different than 13th Gen, but the big thing you get with those is for most kind of codecs you're going to be working with, even you can do like 4K Red or some RAW, be great. But especially if you work with HEVC footage, GoPros, iPhones, that kind of stuff. It has a technology called QuickSync, which can do hardware decoding, which gives you a lot better performance. So for a lot of those people, Intel Core. It's a lot less expensive than something like Intel Xeon or Threadripper Pro, but it's going to get you better performance in those cases. The other side is if you do have a larger budget, you do work with, say, 6K RE or 6K Blackmagic RAW or 8K or 12K now we're even seeing. That's where you go up to the AMD Threadripper Pro line. And they just announced some new CPUs. I'm not sure if release date is publicly available yet, but hopefully soon. You might want to wait until reviews come out for those because we don't know how much faster it's going to be. It might be worth waiting a little bit until availability comes out, but those Threadripper Pros are definitely where, if you're doing really beefy, heavy codecs, you want triple GPUs. Yeah, if you've got a $20,000 budget, yeah, you go that way, but most people don't.